I was the most forgettable daughter in my Idaho family. The day they accidentally forgot to book my plane tickets for my sister's wedding in Hawaii, I understood. I was finally free. 1 year later, I returned. I was not there to beg for a seat at the table. I was there to reset the game for both the family and the industry that once saw me as nothing but a shadow. My name is Rowan Ellery. I am 28 years old, and I am a supply chain analyst at North Bank Therapeutics Logistics in Boise. My job is to find the flaws in a system. I track high-value pharmaceutical shipments, anticipate temperature deviations before they happen, and calculate the precise cost of failure. I live in a world of data, contingency plans, and sterile, cold precision. I am good at my job. I am good at it because my entire life has been an exercise in managing the emotional failures of others. The email that changed everything arrived at 9:04 in the morning, on a Tuesday. I was deep in a report analyzing cold chain integrity for a new biologic agent. The subject line from my mother popped up. Tiny bad news. In the Ellery family, double exclamation points are a form of emotional anesthetic. They are used to numb the sting of the message that follows. I clicked it. The email was a masterpiece of breezy, maternal deflection. Sweetie, the funniest and craziest thing happened. My eyes instinctively scanned past the fluff, hunting for the payload. I found it in the second paragraph. With all the chaos of the deposits for the hotel block and booking the group airfare for Hawaii, it seems your name somehow got missed? Got missed. Not deleted, not intentionally omitted, just missed, like a stray sock in the laundry. We felt just awful when we realized it this morning, she continued. We tried to add you right away, but it's peak season for Hawaii. Rowan, you know how it is. The flights are just impossible now, or they cost a fortune, and the hotel block is completely, totally full. We are just so sad. I looked at the calendar on my monitor. The wedding was in 10 days. My sister, Harper, had been planning this destination wedding for 14 months. I had confirmed my requested vacation time with Marla 6 months ago. Impossible was an exaggeration. Peak season was the convenient excuse. The truth was simpler and much colder. They hadn't forgotten to book my ticket. They had forgotten me. My gaze drifted from the screen up to the gray fabric wall of my cubicle. Pinned between a shipping manifest and a list of freight compliance codes was a single photograph. It was from last Christmas. Harper's arm is draped heavily around my shoulders. She is radiant, all perfect teeth and expensive blonde highlights, beaming for the camera. I am beside her, smiling. My smile is structurally correct. It meets all the requirements of a smile, but it is vacant. It is the photograph my mother posted everywhere, the one captioned, "So blessed to have my two beautiful girls home." What the photo doesn't show is the moment just before it was taken, when Harper hissed at me. "Mom wants the picture. Rowan, can you please just try to look happy for 5 seconds?" It doesn't show the moment immediately after, when her arm dropped from my shoulder as if she'd touched something hot, and she turned back to her fiancé, Colin, to laugh at a joke I hadn't heard. The photo is not a memory. It is a piece of staged propaganda for the perfect family narrative. I scrolled to the end of my mother's email. The final lines landed like a judge's gavel. "We are just heartbroken you won't be there, honey, but we promise we will take so many pictures to send you. It will be just like you were there with us. It will be just like you were there with us." It was not an offer of inclusion. It was a verdict. It was the confirmation of my role in this family. I am not the participant. I am the audience. I am the remote viewer for a life I am supposed to be a part of. The words hung in the sterile office air. A suspended sentence. You are not required. You are not essential. You are not, in the final analysis, even missed. I looked back at the Christmas photo, at Harper's proprietary arm on my shoulder. I have spent my entire conscious life, 27 years, being the thumbtack. I am the functional, unglamorous object that holds the pretty picture to the wall. I am the one who holds things together in the background. I held Harper's high school graduation party together by silently refilling the ice bucket, tracking down her lost car keys, and cleaning up a broken vase before Mom could see it and have a meltdown. I held Dad's disastrous 50th birthday speech steady by finding the note cards he'd left in his den, slipping them to him just as he started to panic. I am the quiet logistics manager of the Ellery family. I make sure their important moments are delivered on time and intact. I am the one who remembers my brother Mason's allergies, the one who knows which topics will set my father off, the one who absorbs the unspoken tensions so everyone else can have a good time. No one ever looks at the thumbtack. They admire the picture. They compliment the frame. The tack is just there, doing its job, invisible, until the day the picture is taken down, and the only thing left behind is the tiny, sharp hole where it used to be. Today, they had taken the picture down. There was no sudden explosion of grief. I didn't feel a rush of hot tears. I didn't sweep my keyboard off the desk. The movies get that part wrong. This kind of realization isn't a firestorm. It is the steady, silent advance of a glacier. It is the immense, cold, quiet pressure that finally calves a continent of ice into the sea. The feeling that settled over me was not anger. It was just empty, a profound, echoing hollowness. It was the absolute absence of feeling. It was the final, clinical confirmation of a suspicion I had held for decades. I looked at my desk. The logistics report for the North Atlantic shipping corridor was still open on my second monitor. My coffee, purchased at 7:30 that morning, sat untouched beside my mouse. I reached for it, took a sip. It was cold, bitter. I swallowed it anyway. The numbers on the report blurred. Gross tonnage, transit times, temperature deviations. It was all just noise. My focus, usually so sharp it could cut glass, had simply dissolved. The engine that drove me had quietly, cleanly ceased. My phone buzzed on the desk, a notification from the Ellery Family Fun group chat. My mother, true to form, had screenshotted her email to me and posted it for the group. "Just the worst news," she typed. "Feeling awful that Rowan can't make it to Hawaii." My brother, Mason, replied first. "That sucks. Hawaii is expensive anyway." My father added, "A real shame. We'll miss you, Ro." And then, a second buzz, a private message from my mother, pinging in immediately after her public performance. This was the real message. "I trust you understand. Rowan," it began. The sweetie was gone. "This is already stressing Harper out so much. You know how sensitive she is before a big event. Please just don't make this a thing. Don't make her sad." I stared at the words, "Don't make her sad." I, the forgotten one, the unbooked ticket, was now being tasked with managing the emotions of the one who had forgotten me. My role was not just to be invisible. My role was to be comfortably invisible. I was to absorb the injury and then immediately soothe the person who delivered it. Something inside me didn't break. It clicked. It slotted into place. A bearing that had been grinding uncomfortably for 28 years finally found its groove. My fingers moved on their own. I typed back a single, automatic response. "I understand. Don't worry about it." My mother replied instantly, "You're a lifesaver, honey. Knew you'd be the mature one." I closed the message thread. I closed my email. I stared at the logistics report, at the cold data. Then, very calmly, I opened a new browser tab. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For 1 second, the old instincts flared up. Check kayak. Check Delta. There must be a red-eye through LAX. I can sleep in the airport. I can get a cheap hotel in Waikiki, far from the resort. I can show up, smile for the pictures, and prove I'm not forgettable. I can still be the thumbtack. But why? Why would I fight so hard to be a background extra in a movie that didn't even want me on set? Why would I spend $4,000 I didn't have to prove my loyalty to people who had demonstrated, in the clearest way possible, that they had none for me? I deleted flights to Honolulu. My fingers typed something else. How to take a 1-year sabbatical. Then, short-term international furnished apartments. Best countries for solo female travelers. Oaxaca. Lisbon.
Medellin.
I wasn't booking a flight to Hawaii. I was planning an extraction. I was activating the ultimate contingency plan, the one I didn't even know I had been building. I was going to disappear. I walked into my boss's office at 4:45 that afternoon. Marla Quinn is a woman who appreciates data. She has no time for emotional variance, which is precisely why we get along. She looked up from a stack of invoices, her expression impatient. "Rowan? Problem on the Antwerp route?" "No," I said. My voice was steady. I hadn't known it would be. "Marla, I need to request a 12-month unpaid leave of absence, effective in 2 weeks." Marla's pen stopped moving. She didn't blink. She just watched me. Marla Quinn is a hard woman to surprise. I had just surprised her. Her eyes, usually a flat, practical gray, sharpened. They searched my face, looking for the data points. Was I sick? Was I grieving? Had I been poached by our competitor? Valence Rex Freight? She found none of the above. She found something else. Something settled. Something absolute. The surprise on her face slowly dissolved, replaced by a flicker of something I had never seen her direct at me. Respect. She had always seen me as a reliable cog, a high-performing, low-maintenance employee. She had never seen me as someone who would detonate her own life on a Tuesday afternoon for no discernible reason. She leaned back in her chair, the old leather groaning. 12 months is a long time, Ellery. That's career suicide for most people in this industry. You know that, right? I do, I said. I'm not most people. She held my gaze for another 10 seconds, running her own calculations. Then she nodded. Once. All right, I'll have HR draw up the papers. 2 weeks. You'd better leave your route protocols in perfect order. They already are, I said. I was at the door when she spoke again. Rowan. I turned. This position, she said, tapping her pen on the desk. It will be here for you when you get back. It was the closest Marla Quinn had ever come to paying a compliment. It was a statement of my value, purely in business terms. You are too good to lose. I nodded. Thank you, Marla. But as I walked back to my desk, a different thought echoed in my head. I'm not sure I'll be waiting for the position. The person who walked out of this building in 2 weeks would not be the same person who had walked in this morning. The old Rowan Ellery, the reliable, invisible, accommodating thumbtack. Her employment at North Bank Therapeutics was ending, permanently. That night, in my small, neat Boise apartment, I didn't pack. I just sat on my sofa in the dark. The Ellery family fun chat had been buzzing all day. Photos of Harper's final dress fitting, emojis of champagne glasses and wedding bells. My name was not mentioned again. My "I understand" had worked perfectly. I was successfully erased. I picked up my phone. I looked at the bright, cheerful notifications. My mother, my sister, my father, my brother. I opened my settings. I went to the group chat. I pressed mute. Then I went further. I logged out of my social media accounts. I changed my email password to a random string of characters I would never remember. I turned off notifications for everything except my banking application and Marla's work email. I set the phone down on the coffee table. The screen went dark. The silence in the apartment was sudden and absolute. It was terrifying. And then, in the span of a single breath, it was freeing. I had just cut the signal. I had severed the tether to my old frame of reference. For 28 years, I had been defined by them. I was the good daughter, the quiet sister, the responsible one. Now, I was no one. I was a blank spreadsheet, a route with no origin and no destination. For the first time in my entire life, I had no idea what was coming next. And for the first time in my entire life, that felt like power. The 2 weeks I had given Marla were not a vacation. They were a liquidation. I did not pack my apartment. I disassembled it. I sold the sofa that I had bought because it was sensible and neutral. I sold the dining room table where I had eaten alone for 3 years. I sold the television that broadcasted images of lives I was not living. I was not sentimental. I was clinical. I posted listings, negotiated prices, and categorized every item of my life by its resale value. What didn't sell? I donated. What couldn't be donated? I threw away. My apartment, once a container for a life of quiet accommodation, became an empty white box. I sublet it to a quiet doctoral student from the university, signing the papers on my last day. When I walked out of my building for the last time, my entire existence was contained in 2 black roller suitcases and 1 gray backpack. My total worldly possessions weighed less than 60 pounds. I was no longer an analyst from Boise. I was just mobile, unencumbered cargo. My family, if they had known, would have expected a trip to Southeast Asia. The typical find-yourself journey through Thailand or Bali. They would have expected me to be sitting on a beach, crying into a journal. That was the last thing I wanted. I did not want comfort. I did not want easy beauty. I wanted friction. I wanted grit. I flew from Boise to Mexico City. The airplane was just a mechanism. I slept through the flight, landed, and immediately boarded a first-class bus south. My destination was Oaxaca. I did not go as a tourist. I did not visit the famous sites. I rented a simple room in a quiet neighborhood. I enrolled in a local language school for the mornings, and in the afternoons. I enrolled in something else, a workshop run by a collective of Zapotec weavers. I was not there to learn to weave. I was there to learn their business. I, who had managed multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical shipments, sat on a dusty floor and learned how the matriarch of the family priced a rug. It was not a formula of materials plus time. The way North Bank would have calculated it, it was a complex algorithm of heritage, the sacredness of the design, the time of year, and the perceived desperation of the buyer. I learned to listen. I listened to stories of how they protected their unique dye formulas derived from the cochineal bug. I learned about their handshake agreements, their supply chain built not on software or purchase orders, but on generations of interfamily trust. It was the most complex logistical network I had ever seen, and it was all managed by human memory. About a week in, sitting in a small, bright cafe, I finally opened the letter. On my 21st birthday, my mother had given me a small, sealed envelope. It was from my great-grandmother, Margaret Ellery, a woman I barely remembered, a woman the family rarely spoke of. Margaret was difficult, was all my mother would say. The instructions, written on the outside, were simple. Open this when you are done trying to fit in and are ready to start building. I had not understood it then. I had put it in a safe deposit box. Before leaving Boise, I had retrieved it. I broke the wax seal. The paper was thick, the handwriting a sharp, intelligent script. It was not a letter of grandmotherly comfort. It was a single page of instructions. Dear Rowan, it began, I have watched you trying to hold that family together. It is a thankless, pointless job. They will only resent you for reminding them of what they lack. The letter went on to detail a small trust she had established, completely separate from the main Ellery estate. It was not a fortune. It was not enough to make me rich, but it was enough to be a foundation. The last line of the letter was the one that made my breath catch. You are the only one in that line who has my patience. You know how to wait for the right moment. Do not waste it. I looked at the small inheritance. It was a seed. It was a weapon. I spent the next 2 days in my room, not sightseeing, but executing a plan. I was Rowan Ellery, analyst. I did not waste resources. I moved the majority of the funds into a conservative portfolio of bonds and index funds. It was my safety net, my guarantee that I would never have to go back. The rest of it, I set aside as my tuition. This was my operating budget for the year. This was the capital I would invest in myself. From Oaxaca, I flew to Quito, Ecuador. I found a new apartment. Oaxaca had been my education in raw, intangible value. Quito would be my education in formalizing it. By day, I volunteered for a high-altitude cacao cooperative. I used my old skills from North Bank. I went with them to the fields, not to harvest, but to survey. They had a world-class product, but their process was a mess. Their quality control was based on guesswork. I, who spoke broken, functional Spanish, introduced them to the universal language of the spreadsheet. I built them a simple, offline tracking system on a cheap laptop. I showed them how to grade the beans by fermentation level and moisture content, how to create consistency batch over batch. I showed them how to prove their quality with data, not just promises. By night, I attended a class at a small technical college. It was a dry, unglamorous course, international trade law. I sat in a concrete room with 20 other students, learning about import tariffs, bills of lading, and customs compliance. I was building a new toolkit. Oaxaca had taught me what was valuable. Quito was teaching me how to move it. My next stop was Medellin, Colombia. If Quito was about law, Medellin was about the fight. I went there to learn how to negotiate. I found a collective of small-batch specialty coffee exporters. They were brilliant farmers, but they were getting crushed in negotiations. They were trying to compete with massive distributors on price, and they were losing. I sat in on their meetings. I watched them offer deeper and deeper discounts, desperate for a contract. "Stop," I said one afternoon, in a meeting with the group's leader. "Stop talking about price. You cannot win that game." He looked at me, exhausted. "Then what, señorita? What else is there?" "Reliability," I said. "A cafe owner in Stockholm does not just want cheap coffee. He wants the exact same bean, with the exact same flavor profile, arriving on the exact same day of the month, every month. He wants his own supply chain to be boring. Your competitor is cheap, but they are sloppy. You will be the reliable one." This was the golden rule I had learned at North Bank. Reliability is always, always worth more than a discount. I helped them redraft their entire proposal. We stopped promising a low cost. We started guaranteeing a quality score, a specific delivery window, and real-time tracking data. We raised our price by 15%. 2 weeks later, the Stockholm buyer signed a 6-month exclusive contract. While this was happening, the background noise from my family had changed. I checked my locked email inbox only once every 2 weeks. The ritual was sterile. I would go to an internet cafe, log in, read the messages as data input, log out, and delete the browser history. I never replied. The tone of the messages had formed a predictable arc. First, in the week after the wedding, there was annoyance. "Rowan, not very nice to ignore your mother. Harper is very hurt you didn't even send a message on her big day." Then came confusion. "Okay, this isn't funny. Your father is starting to get upset. Please call home." Then, after a month, the first hints of real panic. "Rowan, we are genuinely worried. Please, just let us know you are safe." They were worried. It was a new variable. My silence, my complete and total absence, had created a vacuum. The thumbtack was gone, and the picture on the wall was starting to tilt. They had built their entire family dynamic on my silent, load-bearing presence. Now that I was gone, they were all losing their balance. I did not feel guilty. I felt validated. I was also keeping a notebook. It was not a diary. It was not filled with feelings about the sunset in Quito or the taste of the food in Oaxaca. It was my cold road handbook. It was a ledger of new principles for operating in a world where data was scarce and emotions ran high. I wrote, "In a soft market, sell hard consistency." I wrote, "Do not negotiate with people who do not value your core product. You are not a commodity." I wrote, "The person who defines the problem controls the solution." It was through the coffee collective in Medellin that I heard a name, Inés Duarte. She was a Portuguese businesswoman who ran a small, elite logistics company called Lusitania Bridge. She did not move shipping containers of plastic goods. She moved high-value, culturally significant, fragile items. She was the bridge for South American artisans to the high-end markets of Europe. She was coming to Medellin. I used the reputation I had built with the coffee growers to get a meeting. We met in the lobby of her hotel. Inés Duarte was in her late 50s, dressed in impeccable linen, and had the sharpest, most analytical eyes I had ever seen. She wasted no time. "The coffee growers say you are not a tourist," she said, skipping any introduction. "They say you fixed their business." "I just showed them what their customers were actually buying," I replied. It wasn't coffee, it was consistency. Ines nodded slowly, a small smile playing on her lips. She recognized the language. You have the eye of an operator. You see the process behind the product. This is a very rare skill. I did not tell her my life story. I did not mention North Bank. I simply told her what I had learned from the Zapotec weavers about perceived value, and what I had implemented with the Cacao Cooperative regarding quality metrics. She listened for 10 minutes without interrupting. When I was finished, she leaned forward. I have a problem. Rowan, I am trying to source artisan glass from a workshop in Peru. It is beautiful, but my breakage rate on delivery to Lisbon is nearly 30%. It is destroying my margin. My old analyst brain switched on instantly. You have a packaging and a handoff problem, I said. You are using a standard freight forwarder. They are likely moving your specialized cargo from the workshop, taking it to a central hub, and repacking it badly with other goods. You need a dedicated agent on the ground and a new packaging protocol. You need to control the chain from the moment the glass cools. Ines stared at me. Her small smile widened. I know that. It has taken my team 6 months to not figure that out. You did it in 30 seconds. She paused, then made her move. I cannot offer you a salary. My company is not large, but I will offer you a project. Go to Lima, fix my glass problem. I will give you a small commission on every shipment that arrives with a breakage rate under 5%. Agreed, I said. When can you leave? When is the next flight? 3 days later, I was in a hot, dusty workshop outside Lima. For a week, I worked with the glassblowers. I redesigned their entire internal shipping crate. I found a local freight agent I could trust. I documented every step of the new protocol. I oversaw the packing of the first shipment myself. 2 weeks later, an email from Ines. It arrived, breakage, 2%, well done. An hour after that, a wire transfer hit my account. It was a small amount of money. It was not even a quarter of what I used to make in a single month at North Bank. But I stood at an ATM in Lima, looking at the receipt, and I felt something I had never felt before. It was not joy, it was ownership. This was the first dollar I had ever earned that was not a paycheck for being a reliable cog. This was a payment for being a solutions provider. This was the first money that was entirely mine. It was not enough to be rich, but it was enough. It was enough for the next plane ticket. It was enough to prove that my new model worked. Ines's next message came that night. My ceramic supplier in Porto, Portugal, is having a major customs problem. They are seizing his shipments. He says he is doing everything right, but he is losing a fortune. Are you busy? I opened my Cold Road handbook and turned to the map I had been sketching. A line went from Boise to Oaxaca, Oaxaca to Quito, Quito to Medellin, Medellin to Lima. Now, a new line was forming. It stretched across the Atlantic Ocean. I typed back, I am on my way. The new map was beginning to take shape. My new base of operations was Porto, Portugal. I rented a spare, modern apartment overlooking the slate-gray waters of the Douro River. By day, I was the operational arm of Ines Duarte. I was no longer a volunteer. I was her lead contractor. The problem I had been sent to fix was the ceramic supplier whose shipments were being seized by customs. I spent my first week not in an office, but in a dusty warehouse, tracking the manifests. The supplier, a kind, elderly man named Tiago, was convinced the customs agents were corrupt. He was wrong. They were just confused. Tiago was classifying his hand-painted tiles as artisan crafts. The customs agents were classifying them as construction materials. The tariff difference was enormous. The problem was not bribery. It was ambiguity. I spent 3 days rewriting his entire export documentation. I created a new harmonized classification code for his products, complete with photographic evidence of their non-industrial use and clear precedent from EU trade law. I standardized the manifests. The next shipment that went out, with me personally overseeing the paperwork, sailed through customs in 4 hours. Ines was delighted. My commission was secure. But the work for Ines was my day job. At night, I did my own work. I used my new income to buy subscriptions to maritime logistics databases. My small apartment, illuminated only by the glow of 2 monitors, became a private command center. I was no longer just an analyst managing assigned routes. I was a hunter. I was scanning the entire Atlantic. I wasn't just looking for opportunities, I was looking at the competition. And that's when I saw it. The data was stark. My old company, North Bank Therapeutics Logistics, was hemorrhaging market share on the high-value North Atlantic routes. Their delivery times were slipping. Their client complaints, visible on niche industry forums, were increasing. And the company eating their lunch, poaching their biggest clients, was Valence RX Freight. I felt a cold, clinical curiosity. Valence RX was our old bogeyman in Boise. They were aggressive, flashy, and in my opinion, sloppy. But something had changed. They were no longer just sloppy. They were winning. My investigation was interrupted by an alert. It was not an email. It was a message on LinkedIn, a platform I had left dormant for nearly a year. I had only logged back in to establish a sterile professional front for my work with Inez. The message was from a woman I had never heard of, Evelyn March, Director of Procurement at Crestline Pharma Distribution. I researched the company, Crestline, not a giant like the companies North Bank serviced. They were mid-sized, agile, and specialized in next-generation biologics. They were exactly the kind of company that needed a logistical edge to survive against the titans. The message was brief. Ms. Ellery, I have been following the work you and Inez Duarte have been doing with artisan supply chains. Your solutions are creative. I have a problem on a different scale, and I believe you may be the only person who can solve it. Are you available for a video call? I replied, Yes, what time? Now, she wrote back. The call came through at 2:00 in the morning. Porto time. I accepted. Evelyn March appeared on my screen. She was in a brightly lit office, probably in Chicago or New York. She had sharp features, dark hair pulled back severely, and she did not waste a second on pleasantries. Ms. Ellery, I'll be direct. My company needs to cut our logistics costs on our primary South America to European Union lanes, and not by a little. I need to see a reduction of 25, maybe 30%. I remained still. That's not a cost-cutting measure. Ms. March, that's an amputation. You can't achieve that by negotiating freight rates. You'll sacrifice quality. I know, she said, her eyes narrowing. And I cannot sacrifice quality. We ship temperature-sensitive oncology treatments. Our tolerance for error is 0. A 1-degree deviation, and we lose a $2 million shipment. So, you must cut my costs by 30%. And you must maintain a perfect, unbroken cold chain. Everyone I have spoken to, including Valence RX Freight, says it is impossible. She leaned closer to her camera. But they are all trying to fix the old model. I read your case study on the Medellin Coffee Collective. You didn't just find them a cheaper shipper. You rebuilt their entire model. This woman had done her homework. What you are asking for is impossible with the current infrastructure, I said. My voice was flat. You cannot use the standard routes. You cannot use the standard partners. You will be held hostage by the hub and spoke system. So build me a new one, she challenged. I looked at the data I had been analyzing for weeks. The routes, the ports, the loopholes. It can be done, I said. But not by treating your suppliers like commodities. You need a new philosophy. I'm listening. I call it the regional partner, global standard model. I said. The words came to me fully formed, the thesis I had been writing in my head since Oaxaca. The problem with big logistics is that they treat a farm in Quito the same way they treat a factory in Shanghai. It's lazy. The regional partner side means we build dedicated, loyal partnerships on the ground. We respect their local customs, their way of doing business. We don't force them into our software. We adapt to theirs. We make them feel protected. I paused, then delivered the core of the pitch. But, and this is the part they all miss, we enforce a global standard. We lock in our key performance indicators with inflexible data. We audit them not just on cost, but on consistency, on temperature integrity, on communication. We reward them for transparency. We pay them more for reliability, which in the long run costs us less. Evelyn was silent for a long time. She was calculating. "You're proposing building a private, boutique supply chain inside the public one," she said. "I'm proposing a network that is faster, smarter, and more accountable than your competitors," I replied. "Valence RX is winning by throwing discounts around. They will bleed out. We will win by building a system that cannot be easily copied." "Can you deliver this?" she asked. "I am the only one who can." "I'll send the contract," Evelyn said. 6 months? Consulting fee? Plus a performance bonus tied to the cost savings and quality metrics. The contract arrived in my email at 2:30 in the morning. I opened it. The 6-month consulting fee alone was equal to 1 full year of my salary at Northbank Therapeutics. I signed it digitally and sent it back. I was no longer a freelance fixer for artisan goods. I was now a direct, and very well paid, competitor in the pharmaceutical logistics space. I was at war with Valence RX. My first move was to open a dossier on the enemy. I needed to know who was running the Atlantic expansion for Valence RX. Who was the architect of Northbank's defeat? It wasn't hard to find. A recent trade publication article on disruptors in pharma logistics featured a large, glossy photo. I knew him. My stomach didn't drop. It just went cold. Trent Wallace. Trent, the smiling cobra of the Boise office. Trent, who had never generated an original analysis in his life, but who possessed a terrifying genius for presenting other people's work as his own. He was all polished presentations and strategic-sounding buzzwords. He was the man who had, 3 years prior, taken my entire routing analysis for a new vaccine trial, changed the color scheme on the slides, and presented it to the VP of operations while I was home with the flu. He was all sizzle, no steak, but now he was winning. How? I dug deeper. I left the trade publications and went to social media. Trent had always been pathologically active online. His profile was a mess of motivational quotes and photos of himself at conferences. He was thrilled to be exploring synergies in Medellin. He was learning from the ground up in Lima. He was building new bridges in Oaxaca. My blood ran cold. He wasn't innovating. He was following me. I scrolled back, tracing the timeline. 2 months after Inez and I had locked in the coffee contract, Trent was in Medellin. 1 month after my work with the glassblowers, he was in Lima, posting a photo from a restaurant 2 blocks away from the workshop. How did he know? I went back to the Lusitania Bridge website. Inez, proud of our work, had posted blog entries, a new partnership with Zapotec Weavers, celebrating a successful Lima to Lisbon shipment. She had even posted a photo of me, smiling, standing with the glassblowers in their workshop. I zoomed in on the photo, in the background. Through the open workshop door, a street sign was visible. Trent wasn't a strategist. He was a digital stalker. He was using Inez's public-facing success as a map. He was letting me do all the hard work of identifying unique suppliers, and then he was coming in behind me, representing the massive purchasing power of Valence RX and offering them a better deal. He was treating my life's work as open-source intelligence. A hot, sharp anger flared in me, the first real, burning emotion I had felt in months. He wasn't just my rival, he was a parasite. My analyst brain took over. The anger receded, replaced by icy calculation. He thought I was a map. Fine, I would draw him a new one. I called Inez. "I need you to do me a favor," I said. "I need you to post a new blog entry, a throwback from a trip we supposedly took. Post it in 3 days. Tag me." "Where are we going?" she asked, a smile in her voice. "Seville," I said. "We're looking into the Spanish olive oil export market." "We are?" "No," I said. "But Trent Wallace is about to be—" I also broke my own social media silence. I reactivated my dormant professional profile, scrubbed it of any personal data, and posted one. Single update. Excited to be exploring new logistical pathways for high-value agricultural products in Spain. The opportunities are incredible. I attached a stock photo of an olive grove. It was bait, a false breadcrumb. While Trent, who I knew monitored my profile, would be retasking his team to investigate olive oil tariffs, I was making my real move. I heard from Inez's network a week later. A man from Valence RX had indeed shown up in Oaxaca, trying to find the Zapotec Weaving Collective. He had been very American, talked loudly about scaling up production, and offered them a terrible bulk rate contract. He didn't understand that their value was in their inability to be scaled. The matriarch had looked at his proposal, told him his heart was empty, and had refused to see him again. He had burned the bridge I had taken weeks to build. He was clumsy, he was loud, and he was predictable. While he was chasing my ghost in Spain, I was on a plane from Lisbon. I was not going to South America. I was not going to Spain. I was flying to Casablanca. I had been staring at the shipping maps for a week. Everyone, including Trent, was focused on the obvious ports. Rotterdam, Hamburg, Antwerp. They were expensive, congested, and optimized for mega freighters. They were all looking at the wrong map. The key was not to find a cheaper route. It was to build a new one. I had found a gaping hole, a blind spot in Valence RX's strategy, a consolidation hub in Casablanca, Morocco. It was the perfect pivot point, a nexus between South America, West Africa, and Southern Europe. From there, I could bypass the entire English Channel bottleneck and open a new dedicated pharmaceutical-grade lane straight from Lisbon up to the Baltic Sea. Trent was busy trying to copy my last move. I was already 3 moves ahead, building an entirely new board. My 2-week email check had become a clinical ritual, like reviewing a damage report. I would go to a quiet cafe in Porto, order a black coffee, log in, and analyze the incoming data. The data had changed. The initial panic from my family had subsided, replaced by a new, more aggressive strategy, emotional bombardment. The campaign was led, as always, by my mother. The first email in the sequence: "Rowan, I don't know what we've done to deserve this silence, but your father is barely sleeping. He just walks around the house. He doesn't understand what he did wrong. And frankly, neither do I. He's worried sick." The follow-up: 48 hours later. "I hope you know what this is doing to Harper. She is just devastated. She is convinced you won't forgive her for the wedding oversight. She cries about it all the time. She says her sister has abandoned her. It is breaking her heart." I read the words, cold and detached. It was a classic pincer movement. My father's health, my sister's tears. They were framing my absence not as a reaction, but as an attack. My silence was being redefined as a form of aggression. They needed me to be the mature one again, the one who would rush in to manage their discomfort, to absorb the blame for their own actions. For almost a year, I had sent nothing. My silence had become a blank wall they were screaming at. I decided, for the first time, to write back. It was not a negotiation. It was not an apology. It was a statement of terms. I typed 3 short sentences. "I am fine. I am safe. I need time. Please do not ask me where I am." I hit send. I did not check for a reply. I closed the laptop. It was the first formal boundary I had ever drawn in my life, the digital equivalent of a locked door. I discussed it with Inez that evening, over glasses of vino verde at a small restaurant by the river. We were celebrating the successful opening of the Casablanca Consolidation Hub. "I finally replied to my family," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Inez looked at me, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Be careful, Rowan," she said quietly. "Disappearing is the easy part. It is a simple, clean cut, returning. That is the complicated surgery. They will never see you as the new person you have become. They will only see the hole you left, the shape of the person they expected you to be." She took a sip of her wine. "You must decide what you actually want from them when you do go back, if you go back." Her question followed me home. I sat in my quiet apartment, the sounds of Porto drifting in from the street. What did I want? I took out my bound road notebook. I thought about it. I did not want an apology. An apology from them would be a temporary anesthetic, not a cure. I did not want them to make it up to me. That would just be another transaction. I did not want a seat at the table. I was already building my own. I wrote down 3 words. 1. Autonomy. My time, my location, and my decisions would be mine. They would not be subject to their approval, guilt, or emotional agenda. 2. Respect, not affection. Affection was unreliable, a currency they used to buy compliance. I wanted respect, the simple, clean, non-negotiable acknowledgement of my boundaries and my capabilities. 3. No soliciting. I would not beg for a place. I would not audition for their approval. My presence in their lives would not be a default setting. I would be invited, or I would not come. This was my new compass. This was the criteria for my return. My focus was pulled back to the professional world by Evelyn March. My work on the Casablanca route had been a success, a clean surgical strike, but Evelyn was relentless. She was not paying me to fix one problem. She was paying me to win. Good work on Morocco, her email read. Now, a new challenge, a blind bid. A major medical supplier in Finland needs a new logistics partner for their entire Northern European biologic distribution. Everyone is bidding, Valence RX, North Bank, all the big players. The proposals are due in 1 week. She was pushing me out of the shadows. I was no longer a ghost fixing broken artisan routes. She was putting me in a direct, formal, public fight against my old mover and shaker competitors, against Trent. I dove into the request for proposal. I analyzed the supplier's shipping history, their pain points, their projected growth. The trap was obvious. The RFP was designed to trigger a price war. It was a race to the bottom. Trent, I knew, would bid low. He would promise the moon for pennies, planning to make up the margin later with hidden fees and service cuts. North Bank, my old company, would bid their standard, inflated, high-margin rate, relying on their old reputation. I chose a third path. I ignored the price. My proposal was built on a single, radical idea: absolute, guaranteed stability. While my competitors offered a delivery window of 3 to 5 business days, I used my new Baltic route data to offer a window of plus or minus 3 hours. While they promised industry-standard cold chain integrity, I provided a detailed protocol for a zero-deviation guarantee, backed by a severe financial penalty that I proposed myself if we ever failed. I was not selling a service. I was selling certainty. I was the high-cost, zero-risk, obsessively reliable option. I sent the proposal and waited. While I waited, I saw tremors in the industry databases. North Bank Therapeutics was in trouble. They had just lost a major contract on the Antwerp route. The trade journal chatter was specific: a series of catastrophic temperature violations. A client had discovered that their shipments had been compromised for months. I felt a cold, distant flicker of recognition. Before I left Boise, in my final 2 weeks, I had filed a detailed, internal-only report on systemic vulnerabilities in our cold chain monitoring. I had discovered that the sensors on the Antwerp route were faulty, old, and giving false, safe readings. I had filed it, as I always did, with precise data and a clear remediation plan. Marla would have seen it, but in the chaos of my departure, in the daily fires of a collapsing logistics network, they must have forgotten it. They had ignored the data. North Bank was not being beaten by Trent. It was rotting from the inside. It was collapsing under the weight of the very details its management had deemed unimportant. My details. A few days later, a new message alert popped up. LinkedIn. It was Trent. His tone was no longer the arrogant, conquering CEO. It was falsely casual, infused with a manipulative buddy-buddy warmth. Hey, Rowan. Crazy to see you're thriving over in Europe. Just amazing. We should really catch up. I'd love to hear all about your journey. Coffee on me next time you're passing through? I read the message twice, the corrosive irony of it. Hear about my journey. He wasn't interested in my journey. He was interested in my data. He was fishing. He wanted to know who I was working for. He wanted to know what my next move was. He was probing for weakness. The old Rowan would have been flustered. She might have even been flattered. The new Rowan just saw the predictable pattern. He was a parasite, and he was looking for a new host. I did not block him. I did not reply. I did not delete the message. I simply moved my cursor and clicked archive. He was not a threat. He was a variable. And I would store that data for later. The ghosts of my old life were persistent. That weekend, as I was conducting my bi-weekly email check, I saw a flood of messages from distant aunts and cousins. "Look at this. So beautiful. Harper is just glowing." They were all forwarding a link to her social media. She had just posted her 6-month wedding anniversary photos. I clicked. It was a professional shoot. All golden hour light and expensive wine glasses. Harper and Colin, gazing into each other's eyes, on a beautiful, sun-drenched vineyard. The caption was a masterpiece of curated bliss. 6 months with my one and only soulmate, still feeling all the love from our perfect Hawaii day. So blessed. It was a storm of validation, hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. Gorgeous. Perfection. Family is everything. It was a perfect picture, a flawless narrative, the narrative from which I had been so cleanly, so efficiently erased. A year ago, that post would have sent a shard of ice into my heart, the sting of exclusion, the pain of being the footnote. Now, I just looked at it. It was data. It was a performance. It was a story they were telling themselves. It had nothing to do with me. I closed the browser tab. I shut down the laptop. The dopamine-driven world of their validation felt toxic, unreal. I put on my running shoes, left my apartment, and walked. I walked until the sun started to set, all the way across the magnificent, soaring arch of the Dom Luis Bridge. I stood in the middle, high above the Douro. The wind was cold and real. The iron was solid beneath my feet. The city lights of Porto and Gaia glittered on either side. This was real. The data on my screen, the steel of the bridge, the new routes I was building, that was my reality. Their curated world of likes and blessings was just noise. When I returned to my apartment, there was a new email. It was not from my family. It was not from Trent. It was from Marla Quinn. It was the first time she had contacted me since I left North Bank. Her email was, like her, blunt and efficient. It contained only 2 things. The first was a link to a major European logistics trade journal. The headline, Crestline Pharma Distribution wins landmark Finnish contract with disruptive stability-based bid. The article went on to praise the innovative zero-risk data-first proposal that had beaten all the established players. The second part of her email was 2 short sentences. Good work, Ellery. If you ever decide to come back, don't come back as the same person. We wouldn't know what to do with you. I stared at the words. It was the highest compliment Marla had ever given anyone. It was not praise. It was not warmth. It was respect. The second word on my list. I looked at my calendar. It was almost a full year since the tiny bad news email. The day I was supposed to fly to Hawaii. The day my old life ended. I opened my calendar application. I found the date of that anniversary. I set an alarm. 9 a.m. It was not an alarm to commemorate a day of pain. It was a deadline. The end of my sabbatical. The day my contract with Evelyn March was up for renewal. On that day, at that exact time, I would book a new meeting. I was not returning to Boise. I was escalating. I opened my cold road notebook. I thought about my family. I thought about Harper's devastation and my mother's demand that I return and forgive. They saw forgiveness as a reset button, a way to go back to the comfortable, silent way things were. They were wrong. I uncapped my pen and wrote a new entry. Forgiveness isn't a round-trip ticket. It's a private door. You use it to leave a room. You are not required to use it to go back in. Winning the Finnish bid was not an end. It was the key. It unlocked the entire Northern European corridor, with Evelyn's full backing. I stopped being a consultant and became a builder. My next 3 moves were surgical. designed to create an interlocking exclusive supply chain for Crestline. First, I went to Murano, Italy. Crestline needed specialized, medical-grade borosilicate glass vials. They were fragile, and they required a stable, cold-prep transport. I signed an exclusive contract with a small, generations-old glass-blowing guild. I did not just buy their vials. I redesigned their entire packaging protocol, embedding our own cold chain sensors inside the shockproof crates. Second, I flew to Braga, Portugal. I secured our supply of high-grade gelatin capsules. The challenge here was not cold. It was humidity, a 2% variance in moisture, and an entire shipment would be rendered useless, a multi-million-dollar write-off. I negotiated a deal that prioritized climate-controlled storage and integrated desiccant systems over simple speed. Third, I went to Łódź, Poland. This was the linchpin. I found a small, innovative paper mill that was developing advanced, moisture-proof wrapping paper with embedded desiccant properties. It was exactly what the Braga capsules needed. It was expensive, but it was brilliant. I signed a 6-month development and exclusivity deal. I now had the components, the glass, the capsules, the wrapping. Now, I had to build the road. The old model was simple. Supplier to Rotterdam, truck to Finland. It was expensive, slow, and prone to delays. My new map was a symphony of multi-stop logistics. It was the regional partner global standard model in physical form. We consolidated the Murano glass and Braga capsules at our primary hub in Porto. From there, a dedicated, climate-controlled feeder ship, not a mega freighter, took the cargo north, but we did not go to Rotterdam. We went to Gdansk, Poland. Gdansk was my secret weapon. It was my Baltic pivot. At Gdansk, our cargo was met by the moisture-proof paper from Łódź. The components were assembled, packaged, and quality-checked in a bonded warehouse I had personally vetted. From Gdansk, they entered the final, high-speed connection across the North Sea to Finland. The risks were decentralized. A storm in the English Channel did not matter. A strike at Antwerp was irrelevant. My cargo was on a cleaner, quieter, faster path. The results were immediate and brutal. I presented the data to Evelyn on our weekly call. Our end-to-end logistics cost for the Finnish contract had been reduced by 32%. Our delivery window was stable. Our quality control violations were 0. But the real innovation, the part Trent could never copy, was the service level agreement. My SLAs were not punitive, they were collaborative. The old model. If you fail, we fine you. My model. The lower your failure rate, the higher your bonus, the more transparent your data, the faster you get paid. I turned my suppliers from vendors into partners. They began calling me with potential problems before they happened, because they knew I would reward them for the honesty, not punish them for the error. I was building a supply chain based on trust, not fear. The market felt the impact. Crestline Pharma Distribution, once a mid-sized player, suddenly looked like a heavyweight. Our regional market share in Northern Europe jumped by 11% in 1 quarter. My 6-month contract was nearing its end. Evelyn March scheduled a video call. The alarm on my calendar, the 1-year anniversary of the forgotten ticket, was 1 week away. Evelyn did not bother with praise. "The model works," she said. "It works better than I expected. This is not a consulting project anymore. Rowan, this is a new division." She paused. "I am offering you a permanent, senior-level position. I want you here, at the Chicago headquarters. Director of International Operations. You will build out your European model and then replicate it for our Asian and South American markets." A year ago, I was an analyst in a cubicle. Now I was being offered a directorship. I did not say thank you. I just looked at her, processing the terms. "I accept," I said, "on 2 conditions. Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "First," I said, "I have full autonomous authority to build my team, my hires, my protocols, no internal committees." "Agreed," she said instantly. "Second," I continued, "my division is firewalled from the public relations department. We will not be issuing press releases about our synergies. We will not be doing team-building photo ops. We will not be part of any fluff. The data will speak for itself. Evelyn actually smiled. I'll handle PR. Welcome to Crestline. Rowan, officially. My new role began immediately, even before I left Porto. And my first problem was a familiar one. Evelyn forwarded me an internal intel memo. Valence RX is making a move, she wrote. They are planning an aggressive price war. They're preparing to loss lead on 3 of our biggest contracts to try and bleed us out. The memo was specific. They were going to underbid us by a staggering 20%. They can't sustain that, I said. They'll go bankrupt. They think they can, Evelyn wrote back. Our source says they somehow got their hands on our internal cost data. They think they know our margins. They think they can match our efficiency. Trent. It had to be Trent. He had a mole, or he had bought one. He doesn't have our data, I said. He has an imitation of our data. He sees the what, but he does not understand the why. He doesn't have our supplier relationships. He doesn't have the trust. How do we fight them, Rowan? We can't win a price war. We don't, I said. We let him win. I felt that old, cold, clinical focus settle over me. Trent thought he had a map. I would give him one. I spent the next 24 hours creating a new logistics proposal. I called it the Canary Transport Plan. It was beautiful. It was detailed. It was full of charts, graphs, and projected cost savings. It was also a complete fabrication. It was built on a deliberate, fatal flaw. It proposed using a new consolidation hub in the Canary Islands, a location that seemed plausible on a map but was, in reality, a logistical nightmare of tariffs and inefficient shipping lanes. The parameters I fed into the plan were false. The fuel costs were wrong. The port fees were underestimated. I accidentally saved the plan on a shared server, one I knew was vulnerable, one my intel suggested the mole had access to. It was a mousetrap. I did not have to wait long. 2 days later, my contacts at 2 of our biggest suppliers called me, sounding panicked. Rowan, one said, Valence RX just came to us. They want an exclusive deal. They are bidding on the route using a new plan. Something about the Canary Islands. The prices they are quoting are insane. They are lower than our actual costs. They are demanding we sign. Trent had taken the bait. He was not just bidding with my false data. He was trying to use it to steal my suppliers. What did you tell them? I asked. I told them to get lost, the supplier said. I told them I do not trust a man who does not understand my margins. I told them I trust you. We are signing the narrow exclusivity deal we discussed last week. I hung up and got a second call. The other supplier, the same story. Trent had not only failed to steal them, he had insulted them. He had exposed his ignorance. He had proven my core principle. He was focused on price, not partnership. He had locked himself into a bidding war based on a map that led directly off a cliff. While Trent was busy self-destructing, a piece of my past finally imploded. A small, dry news alert from a Boise business journal. North Bank Therapeutics fined for gross negligence in humidity control protocols. I read the short article. They had been fined heavily for systemic failures in storing moisture-sensitive tablets. The exact protocols I had flagged, the ones I had designed the Wooge contract to solve. They had failed, not because of a competitor, but because of their own incompetence. I closed the tab. My phone buzzed. It was an email from Evelyn. It was exactly 1 year, to the day, since my mother's tiny bad news email. Evelyn's message was short. Your new desk is ready. Is it time to come back to the United States? I looked at the date, the anniversary. I typed back, yes, I'll be there next week. I opened a new browser tab. I did not search for deals. I did not look for the cheapest option. I went directly to the airline's website. I booked a non-stop business class flight from Lisbon to Chicago O'Hare. I entered my name, Rowan Ellery. I entered my credit card information. I clicked Purchase. The confirmation email arrived 30 seconds later. This time, I was the one holding the ticket. I did not fly back to Boise. A return to my childhood home would have been a concession, a symbolic return to the old hierarchy. I was no longer an Ellery of Idaho. I was the director of international operations for Crestline Pharma, and my new headquarters were in Chicago. My first flight to the United States in a year landed in Minneapolis. It was neutral territory. It was close enough to be a deliberate choice, but far enough to maintain a secure perimeter. I did not stay in a hotel. I rented a sterile, short-term corporate apartment with white walls, gray furniture, and no personality whatsoever. It was perfect. It was a fortress of anonymity. I had emailed my parents from Porto. I had told them my new job was bringing me back to the Midwest. I had told them I would be in Minneapolis for 1 week for onboarding, and that I had a single evening free. I dictated the time and the place. The meeting was set for a steakhouse, one of those dark, expensive places with high-backed booths and heavy silverware, a place designed for corporate negotiations and uncomfortable family ceasefires, a place where no one would raise their voice. I arrived first. I took the seat that faced the entire restaurant, my back to the wall. I had been a supply chain analyst. I understood the strategic value of controlling the field of vision. They arrived together, a nervous cluster. My father, looking older, his anxiety visible in the way he fiddled with his cuffs. My mother, projecting a brittle, forced brightness, as if this were a completely normal Tuesday dinner. My brother, Mason, looking uncomfortable, his eyes darting everywhere but at me. And Harper. She was with her husband, Colin, and she looked pale. The radiant Hawaiian bride had been replaced by a woman who seemed unsure, her hand gripping Colin's as if he were a life raft. They slid into the booth. The air was thick and cold. "Rowan," my father said, his voice rough. You look good. Very professional," my mother finished, her smile tight. "So sophisticated." "Hello, everyone," I said. My voice was calm, neutral. I did not stand to hug them. I did not offer the ritual kisses of affection. I simply sat, my hands resting on the table. We ordered drinks. The silence was agonizing. Mason tried to fill it. "So, Chicago, huh? Big step up from Boise, windy, deep dish pizza, all that." "It's a strategic location for my new role," I said. The drinks arrived. My father raised his glass, his hand shaking slightly. "Rowan, there's no excuse for what we did, for the ticket. It was a terrible, unforgivable thing, and I am just so sorry." He said it without qualification. He said it looking me directly in the eye. It was a clean apology, and I respected it. "Thank you, Dad," I said. My mother, however, could not let the silence sit. She could not accept the simple, blunt admission of failure. "We were just so busy. Rowan." She jumped in, her voice acquiring that familiar, defensive edge. "You cannot imagine the logistics of a destination wedding, the hotel blocks, the deposits, the caterers. Your father was stressed. Harper was a wreck. It was just chaos." I looked at her. I had spent a year building a multinational logistics network from scratch. I had negotiated with Portuguese customs, Italian glassblowers, and Polish manufacturers. I had outmaneuvered a corporate predator and built a supply chain that was now the talk of an industry. She was trying to sell chaos to the woman who had just weaponized it. I did not raise my voice. I did not get angry. I simply asked the question, "Were you busy enough to forget my name on the list?" My mother's mouth opened, then closed. The forced smile evaporated. The blood drained from her face. She had no answer. She had walked directly into a steel trap of her own making. She looked down at her water glass, and she went completely, utterly silent. The silence was broken by a new sound, a wet, sharp sniffle. It was Harper. Her face was crumbling. "I don't understand," she whispered, the tears starting to spill, hot and fast. "Why are you doing this? Why are you being so cold? I just thought you'd always be there. You were always there." It was the single most honest thing she had ever said to me. It was the thesis statement of my entire life. Exactly, I said, my voice as soft as hers, but with zero tremor. I was always there, which meant I was never counted. I was a given. I was an assumption. I wasn't a person you had to remember to invite, because I was just part of the furniture. The furniture doesn't need a plane ticket. That's not true, she cried, pulling her hand away from Colin's to wipe her face. Isn't it? I asked. This is, Mason started, trying to find his footing, trying to be the peacemaker. He forced a laugh. Wow, okay, this is heavy. Can we just order? I mean, at least you saved money on a really bad bridesmaid dress, right? They were not great. He was trying to deploy the old family tactic, use a bad joke to defuse the bomb. The old Rowan would have seized on it, desperate to end the confrontation. The new Rowan just turned her head. I looked at my brother. You forgot my 27th birthday last year. Mason, I said. It was not an accusation. It was a data point. You were in Boise. You were 10 minutes away. You didn't call. You didn't text. Mason's smile vanished. He looked like I had slapped him. The entire table, which had been balanced on a knife edge of tension, now collapsed into a dark, silent void. I had just taken their one isolated oversight and proven, with a single, irrefutable fact, that it was not an exception, it was a pattern, it was the system. The waiter arrived, a look of pure terror on his face. We ordered. They were all staring at me. They were broken. They were waiting for the next attack, or for the part where I would break down, cry, and absolve them. I did neither. I let them sit in the silence they had created. When the waiter left, I picked up my water glass. I am not here to talk about the past, I said. My voice was crisp, professional. It's done. I'm here to tell you what I have been doing, and to establish how we are going to interact from this point forward. They looked bewildered. This was not on the script. For the last 12 months, I began, I have been working as a logistics consultant and operator. I rebuilt the artisan supply chain for Lusitania Bridge. I then went to work for Crestline Pharma Distribution, where I designed and implemented a new multi-hub transport map for their entire Northern European market. I built a consolidation hub in Casablanca. I established new quality control standards for their suppliers in Italy, Portugal, and Poland. I am now the Director of International Operations. I am building a global team, and I am based in Chicago. I did not say it with pride. I did not say it with arrogance. I recited it like a quarterly report. I was not the forgotten daughter seeking pity. I was a senior executive presenting her credentials. I was showing them, in the only language they could not refute, that I was no longer their thumbtack. I was the architect. My mother was the first to find her voice. She was looking at me as if for the first time. The brittle anger was gone. The defensiveness was gone. She just looked lost. Rowan, she said, her voice small. I don't even know that person. What do you want us to do? It was the first real question she had asked me. It was not a demand. It was not an assumption. It was a request for terms. You're going to respect my boundaries, I said. The first one is this. I will not be your default support system. My phone is not a 911 line for your emotional crises. I looked at my mother, then at Harper. From now on, you will respect my silence. When I am busy, I will not respond. You will not send a barrage of, "Are you okay?" messages. You will not call my father and tell him I am ignoring you. You will wait for me to reply. I paused. We are going to try this for 1 month. We can exchange short texts, no forced, weekly, check-in calls. If this month goes well, we will talk about meeting again after Thanksgiving. If it does not, we will not. This was my SLA, my service level agreement. My father nodded immediately. Okay, Ro, whatever you say. Harper just sniffed, staring at her plate. My mother looked like she wanted to argue, but one look from my father silenced her. The food came, We ate. It was the most expensive, silent, and productive meal of our lives. When the check came, I placed my corporate card on the table. My father started to object. I just looked at him. "It's my expense account. Dad, this was a business meeting." We stood up to leave. The air was still cold, but the pressure had dropped. We had a new protocol. As we stood by the door, Harper stepped in front of me. "Rowan, can I please have a hug?" It was her old currency, the one she had always used, affection, the plea for physical absolution. I looked at her tear-stained, desperate face. The old Rowan would have melted, desperate to comfort her, to restore the perfect sister narrative. I did not refuse.
"Okay, Harper," I said.
She lunged forward, wrapping her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder, starting to sob again. "I'm so sorry. Ro, I'm so—" I did not hug her back. I did not pat her on the back. I just stood there, my arms at my sides, and I allowed the hug to happen. I was not a participant. I was a stationary object, permitting the contact. After a few seconds, she felt my absolute stillness. She felt the total lack of reciprocity. She pulled away, her face a mask of confusion. I had given her nothing, no comfort, no forgiveness, no promise that we were okay. I had just let her hug me. "I will be in touch," I said to my family. I turned, and I walked out of the steakhouse alone. Back in my sterile apartment, I checked my new work email one last time before bed. An internal memo had come through from Evelyn. It was a simple data update on a competitor. FYI, Valence RX Freight just announced an internal restructuring. Trent Wallace has been moved off active accounts and promoted to Director of International Strategy. Title: no team. Seems his Canary Islands plan didn't work out. A small, cold smile touched my lips. He had been given a fancy title and put in a corporate closet. He was a non-entity, a thumbtack. I closed the email. I opened my new work calendar. I went forward. Exactly 12 months. I found the date. I created a new event. Napa, Harper's one-year vow renewal. I did not mark it as a family event. I marked it as a potential strategic milestone. I saved it, and I went to sleep. My office in Chicago was on the 42nd floor. It was a glass box in the sky. Looking out over the geometric sprawl of the city and the flat, endless gray of Lake Michigan, it was the complete antithesis of my old cubicle in Boise. There was no fabric-covered wall to pin a perfect family photo to. There was only glass, steel, and the cold, clear light of authority. My first task was not to manage roots. It was to build my army. I had full autonomy, and I used it. I did not hire based on pedigree or cultural fit. I hired based on surgical skill. My first hire was Tilda Raines. She was a quiet, obsessive woman from a small firm in Minneapolis who the industry considered a doomsayer. I considered her a prophet. Her specialty was cold chain risk. She could look at a weather pattern in the North Atlantic and tell you the precise statistical probability of a 2-degree temperature spike in a container 3 weeks from now. She was my shield. My second hire was Jace Monroe. Jace was a former maritime analyst who had been fired from a massive freight conglomerate for being, in his words, a pain in the ass. He was a pain in the ass because he refused to accept bundled shipping costs. He deconstructed them. He could tell you the exact cost of a single container's journey, down to the fuel surcharge and the specific port handling fee in Gdansk. He was my scalpel. My third hire was Priya Nolan. She had a Western name, an Indian heritage, and the fastest business development mind I had ever encountered. She had been working in a dead-end sales job at a paper company. She didn't just sell. She listened. She could get a supplier to tell her their deepest anxieties in 5 minutes, and then she would formulate a contract that solved them. She was my voice. Tilda, Jace, Priya, and me, we were not a department. We were a mini project management office, a rapid response unit for Crestline's entire international operation. I instituted my core philosophy from day one. We do not guess, we do not assume, and we do not operate on good feelings. Every decision, from changing a shipping lane to signing a new supplier, was subject to a full data audit after the fact. We would be our own harshest critics. My new supplier integrity program went live in the first month. It was the formal version of what I had promised in Europe. We paid our partners for transparency. We gave bonuses for beating quality control metrics, and we penalized, heavily, for backroom deals or opaque data. If a supplier was caught offering a kickback or falsifying a report, we did not renegotiate. We terminated. The message was clear. Integrity was not a buzzword. It was our most valuable, non-negotiable commodity. We were building a clean machine, and the old, dirty machines did not like it. Valence RX, as Evelyn had warned, launched their attack. The news came through Jace. "They're at it again," he said, walking into my office. "They are officially underbidding us on the entire West Texas hospital network. They're cutting their price by 25%. We can't match that. Rowan, it's a bloodbath." I looked at the numbers. They were indeed losing a catastrophic amount of money on every shipment. Trent was trying to buy market share, assuming we would be forced to either bleed with him or run. "He's running the same play," I said. "He thinks this is about price. He's trying to scare Evelyn." "Is she scared?" Jace asked. "She's a realist," I said, "but we're not going to fight him on his terms." I called Evelyn. "He's offering them a discount," I said. "We're going to offer them a guarantee." That afternoon, we sent our revised proposal to the Texas network. We did not change our price by a single cent. Instead, we added a new clause to the SLA. It was a single sentence, drafted by Tilda Raines. We guaranteed a maximum spoilage and loss rate of 0.3% across all shipments for the life of the contract. If we violated that number by even a single vial, we would not just refund the shipment. We would pay a penalty fine of $250,000. It was an audacious, almost insane promise, but I knew Tilda's risk models, I knew Jace's roots, I knew Priya's supplier relationships, I knew my machine was clean. The Texas network called us 24 hours later. They had taken our new SLA and presented it to Valence RX, asking them to match the terms. Trent, of course, could not. He couldn't guarantee 0.3%. He was probably running at 5 or 6% spoilage and hiding it in his accounting. His entire network was built on cheap, fast, and sloppy routes. Signing that guarantee would have bankrupted him in a month. Valence RX formally withdrew their bid. We won the contract. We had not lowered our price. We had defined our value. The fallout was immediate. 2 days later, I received a meeting request, not on LinkedIn. This time, it was a direct, formal calendar invite to my new Crestline email address. From Trent Wallace, Director of International Strategy, Valence RX Freight. Subject, Cooperation and Coffee. He was proposing a friendly, high-level chat at a coffee shop in the West Loop. He wanted to explore potential synergies between our two companies. He was not inviting me for coffee. He was probing for a truce. His price war had failed, and he had been publicly humiliated by our countermove. He was coming to see if he could gather intel, or perhaps try to poach me. I replied, "I'm happy to meet Trent." And then I changed the venue. I moved it to the sterile, soulless coffee bar in the lobby of my own office building. He would have to walk into my territory. He would have to look up at the 42 floors of the Crestline headquarters while I looked down. I was waiting for him when he arrived, holding a simple black coffee. He walked in, trying to project his old, effortless charm, but I could see the tightness around his eyes. He had been in the corporate closet for a few months now, and his title was not protecting him from the reality of his failure. "Rowan," he said, forcing a bright smile. "You look... wow, this is some setup you have here, that Finnish contract. That was a hell of a strategy. Really impressive." He was trying to flatter me. He was positioning himself as a peer, an admirer of my strategy. I did not smile back. I took a sip of my coffee. "You've always been very good at presenting strategies. Trent," I said, my voice quiet and flat. His smile faltered. He knew exactly what I meant. I had just, in the politest way possible, reminded him of the vaccine trial analysis. I had reminded him that I knew he was a plagiarist and a fraud. I had established the real history between us, and in doing so, I had closed the door on that history forever. It was no longer a source of pain for me. It was just a fact. He recovered, but his armor was cracked. "Look," he said, dropping the pretense. "We got off on a bad foot. This market is big enough for both of us. There's no reason to keep slashing at each other." "I'm not slashing, Trent," I said. "I'm just building. You're the one who keeps running into my construction." I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. I opened a public-facing market analysis report. "You're not here for synergies. You're here because this is you." I turned the phone to him. It showed a simple line graph. Valence RX's market share in the specialty pharma corridor. Since his Canary Islands strategy had imploded, it had fallen by 9%. "That's a public number." "Trent," I said, "I'm not boasting. I'm just showing you the data. The way you're operating is not sustainable. My system is." He stared at the screen. The charm was gone. All that was left was the raw, hollow ambition of a man who had been outplayed. He had no more moves. "It was good to see you," I said, picking up my coffee. I stood up. I did not shake his hand. I left him sitting in my lobby and went back up to the 42nd floor. My victory was short. A new problem was already waiting. This one was internal. An anonymous message appeared in my inbox. It was not from a Crestline email. It was from a disposable, encrypted account. "Director Ellery, I admire your work. You are building something real. Be careful. Not everyone on your side of the building is as clean as you are. Your cost analyses are getting out. Watch the networking crowd." A leak. Trent had failed to get the data from me, so he had found another way. My canary trap had caught him, but the mole was still active. I did not go to HR. I did not go to Evelyn. A public investigation would cause panic, and it would never find the source. This was not a problem for a bureaucracy. This was a problem for an analyst. I called Tilda and Jace into my office. "We have a data integrity problem," I said. "Starting now, we are implementing a new protocol." I spent that night building a digital watermarking system. It was not complex, but it was tedious. Every single report that left my office, every cost analysis, every route proposal, every supplier list would be unique. For the version going to the finance department, I would change the kerning on the letter A in the third paragraph by 1/100th of a point. For the version going to domestic marketing, I would add a single invisible pixel to the company logo. For the version going to mid-level operations managers, I would alter the spacing in the footer. To the naked eye, all the documents were identical, but to me, each one was a fingerprint. Each one was bait. I seeded the new reports. Then, I waited. It took 1 week. A proposal from Valence RX landed on a new client's desk, undercutting our bid by $1. The client, loyal to us, forwarded it. "They seem to know your numbers, Rowan." I took their proposal. I took my copy of the report I had watermarked. I scanned both. The fingerprint was there. The proposal from Valence RX was built on data from the report I had sent to a mid-level operations manager named David Chen. I looked him up. David Chen, a 5-year employee. Good reviews, ambitious, and according to his social media, a very active participant in Chicago's professional networking scene. He was a regular at PharmaTech Thursday and Logistics Leaders Happy Hours. He was not a spy. He was a fool. He was a man who liked to show off his knowledge. He was trading our company secrets for a free drink and the feeling of being an insider. I did not confront him. I did not have him fired. A public execution would just make him a martyr and alert the real spies. I just removed him. I went into our system and rerouted his data access. From that moment on, every report David Chen received was a low-access version. It contained summaries, but no raw cost data, no route specifics, no supplier names. His data stream had been quietly, surgically cut. He was still in the office, still drawing his salary, but he was now operating in a complete information vacuum. The leak was plugged. No scandal, no noise. Evelyn stopped by my office that Friday. "The Texas numbers are in," she said. "The margins are holding at 15%. Just like you forecasted. The board is pleased." "Good," I said, not looking up from a report. "The new India route will add another 2%. She paused. "They are not just pleased. Rowan, they are talking about the next fiscal year. The VP of International Operations is retiring." I stopped typing. I looked up. "It's not an offer," she said. "Not yet. But if your projections for next quarter hold true, it will be the youngest vice president in this company's history. It's a very big mountain." I nodded slowly. "I appreciate you telling me." She left. I turned my chair and looked out the window. At the vast, cold lake. Vice president. It was the top of the ladder. It was the ultimate seat at the table. A year ago, I would have killed for it. But Inez's words came back to me. You must decide what you actually want. I opened my old Cold Road notebook, now sitting in the drawer of my $40,000 desk. I turned to a blank page. I wrote, "The next peak is not on a resume. It is the ability to see the whole board. It is the power to stay out of the noise." The title did not matter. The autonomy did. The control did. The ability to build, without interference, was the only promotion I cared about. The next 6 months were not a war. They were a build. The foundation I had laid in Europe became the template for a global expansion, and my team, Tilda, Jace, and Priya, executed it with ruthless precision. My primary target was the India to East Coast corridor, a notoriously chaotic route. I did not try to fix the old, congested paths. We bypassed them entirely. I negotiated a new multimodal link through the port of Salalah in Oman. Jace secured a dedicated, high-speed maritime lane, and Tilda worked with a German engineering firm to design an improved cold chain gasket, one that could withstand the extreme temperature shifts of the Arabian Sea. The results were not incremental. They were transformative. The average transit delay on that route, which had been a source of agony for Crestline, dropped by 18%. Simultaneously, my Casablanca hub officially went live. It was no longer a secret pivot point. It was the heart of our new Atlantic operation. We rerouted 2/3 of our South American cargo through it, completely bypassing a major northern European port that was crippled by a dockworkers' strike, while our competitors, including North Bank, were stuck in a logistical traffic jam. Our shipments were flowing. The numbers I presented to Evelyn at the end of the quarter were clean and undeniable. Crestline's international market share had crossed the 20% threshold for the first time in the company's history. My name, once a ghost on industry forums, was now a commodity. The job offers started coming in. They were not from small firms. They were from the titans, the massive conglomerates I had been stealing from. The first was a call from a recruiter for a top-tier freight forwarder. They offered me a senior vice president title, a corner office in Hamburg, and a staggering salary, but when I read the job description, it was all stakeholder management and interdepartmental synergy. It was a figurehead position. They wanted to buy my name to put on their failing letterhead. I declined. The second was from a venture capital firm. They wanted me to be an operator in residence, to consult with their portfolio of struggling logistics startups. They wanted to buy my playbook. I declined. The third was the most direct. A major competitor, larger even than Valence RX, flew a managing director to Chicago just to have lunch with me. "Name your price, Rowan," he said. "We want you to come in and run our entire European division. Just do what you're doing. But for us." I looked at him. "And what happens when your board questions my methods? When I terminate a 30-year supplier for faking a report? When I refuse to build a route based on a handshake deal from your golf buddy? Will you back me? Or will you ask me to manage the relationship?" He did not have an answer. "I'm not for sale," I said. "I'm not looking for a title. I'm building something. You're just looking for a patch. I was rejecting the noisy, hollow trappings of success. I had already found what I wanted. The pure, unfiltered power to build according to my own principles. The new power dynamics were also playing out in my personal life. The 1-month SLA I had imposed on my family had been a success, mostly because they were terrified of my silence. The texts were short, factual, and infrequent. The emotional bombardments had ceased. So, I agreed to the next step. My mother emailed. I have a business trip to Milwaukee. I could take the train down to Chicago for an evening, just to see you. I agreed. We met at a quiet, neutral restaurant in my neighborhood. She was nervous. The old, brittle confidence was gone. She was just a woman in a hotel, visiting a daughter she clearly did not understand. We did not talk about the wedding. We did not talk about Hawaii. We did not talk about her stress or Harper's devastation. I did not list her failures, and she did not offer any more excuses. Instead, she asked me a question. This job you have, the one in Poland, what did you actually do? So I told her. I told her about the moisture-proof paper. I explained how a 2% humidity variance could destroy $1 million shipment of gelatin capsules. I explained how I found the mill, how I negotiated the exclusivity, and how it connected to the hub in Gdansk. She just listened. She did not understand the specifics, but she understood the complexity. She understood the stakes. I never knew, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I just thought you worked in an office, like your father. I didn't know you built things. She was not seeing the good, mature daughter. She was not seeing the unforgiving, cold sister. She was seeing a competent, foreign adult. She was seeing the person I had become while she was busy looking at Harper. It was not forgiveness. It was not absolution. But it was a beginning. It was the first, real, data-driven conversation of our lives. The second test came a week later. A phone call from Harper. She sounded frantic. Rowan, thank God. I need your help. It's Colin. His design company. It's a mess. He's not going to make payroll. He says the bank won't extend his credit. We might have to sell the condo. I didn't know who else to call. You're so good with numbers. The old Rowan would have dived in. She would have spent all night on the phone. She would have analyzed his books. She would have transferred money from her own account, sacrificing her own security to fix her sister's crisis. I sat in my 42nd floor office, looking out at the lake. Harper, I cannot help you, I said. The silence on the other end was a gasp. What? What do you mean? I'm not asking for... I just need advice. I will not manage Colin's company, I said, my voice firm but not unkind. And I will not be giving you any money. That is a hard boundary. Oh, she said. Her voice was small, crushed. I relented, but only on my terms. This is what I will do. I am going to email you a blank, 12-week cash flow forecast template. It is a simple spreadsheet. You and Colin will sit down, and you will fill in every single number, every dollar coming in, every dollar going out. You will do this yourselves. It will show you exactly where your business is failing. It will show you what you have to cut. I was not giving her a fish. I was not even teaching her to fish. I was emailing her a schematic for a fishing rod and telling her to build it herself. This is the only help I will offer. Harper, I said, the tool is yours. The work is yours. She stammered a thank you. I sent the email and archived the thread. I had done my part. A few days later, a different kind of message. A text from my brother, Mason. It was just a photo. It showed our backyard in Boise, which had been overgrown and messy for years. In the photo, our father was on his knees, his back to the camera, weeding a long-neglected flower bed. The caption from Mason was simple. Dad's learning patience. He says he's going to replant the whole thing. It's quiet around here. I looked at the picture. My father, the impatient, anxious man, was finally tending his own garden. I smiled, a real, uncomplicated smile. I sent back a single text. That's good, Mason. The world outside my family continued to shift. The final piece of my old life crumbled into dust. Evelyn forwarded me another industry memo. Valence RX had replaced its CEO. The price war, combined with the catastrophic failure of the canary strategy, had been fatal. The new leadership was cleaning house. Trent Wallace, the memo noted, was no longer with the company. He had not been demoted this time. He had been erased. He was not a factor. He was not even data. He was just gone. I felt nothing. No surge of victory, no satisfaction. He was an inefficient variable that had been logically removed from the equation. The next morning, a formal, heavy crepe envelope was on my desk. It was not an email. It was an internal, sealed letter from Evelyn March's office. Rowan, it began, the board of directors formally requests your presence at the annual strategy summit. You will be the keynote presenter. We require your comprehensive 24-month plan for the future of Crestline's global operations. This was it. This was the test for the vice presidency. This was not a meeting. It was an audition. The night before the presentation, I did not stay up late rehearsing. I did not memorize buzzwords, Tilda, Jace, Priya, and I had already built the machine. The data was perfect. I left the office at 5. I went to my apartment, changed, and went for a run along the Chicago River. The air was cold, and the city was lit up against the dark. I just ran. I ran until the noise in my head went quiet. I stopped, looking at the water. I thought about the boardroom I would face in the morning, a room full of men and women who were older, richer, and more established than I could imagine. I gave myself one simple instruction: do not perform, do not try to impress them, do not be the person they expect. Just tell the truth. Show them the map, show them the data, show them the machine you built. The boardroom was all dark wood and intimidating silence. Evelyn was there, at the end of the table, her face an impassive mask. I stood at the front, with a single, massive screen behind me. "Good morning," I said. "For the last year, you have seen the results of my team's work in Europe. Today, I am not here to show you how we succeeded. I am here to show you why it is a scalable, global, and permanent model." I clicked. The screen lit up. It was not a spreadsheet. It was a map, a new map of the world. "This is our new philosophy," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. "Localize responsibility, globalize standards." I walked them through it, the multi-hub system, the pivot to Casablanca, the new Oman channel. I showed them the regional KPIs, how we held a supplier in India to the exact same data integrity standard as a supplier in Italy, but how we used different, localized contracts to achieve it. I showed them the integrity program. I showed them the bonus for transparency model. I showed them, in cold, hard numbers, how investing in our suppliers' trust had yielded a higher, more sustainable return than all of Valence RX's price cuts combined. When I finished, there was a long silence. A man at the end of the table, the one I knew was the chairman, leaned forward. "Ms. Ellery," he said, his voice a low gravel, "this is not a logistics plan. This is a corporate doctrine." "It is, sir," I replied, "because our greatest vulnerability is not a competitor. It is our own inefficiency. Our greatest asset is not our ships. It is our integrity." I finished. I sat down. Evelyn motioned for me to leave the room. I waited in the anteroom for 20 minutes, though it felt like an hour. The door opened. Evelyn walked out. She did not smile. She simply looked at me. "The vote was faster than I anticipated," she said. She extended her hand. "Welcome to the C-suite, Madam Vice President. Your new office is on the 50th floor." My new office on the 50th floor was not just higher, it was quieter. The promotion to Vice President of International Operations meant I was no longer just building the machine. I was now pointing it. My first move was to aim it at the largest, most lucrative, and most protected market in the United States, the West Coast Private Hospital Consortium. This was not a single contract. It was an alliance. I spent 2 months not selling. But in listening tours with their procurement VPs, they were not worried about price. They were worried about resilience. They were terrified of another global disruption. I did not sell them routes. I sold them redundancy. I showed them my multi-hub map, my localized responsibility, globalized standards philosophy. I signed a memorandum of understanding with the entire pharmaceutical alliance, opening the door to the largest private hospital market in the country. This was the big one. And with new territory came new predators. My team was now a well-oiled weapon. Tilda Raines was my early warning system. She walked into my office, her face calm, which is how I knew it was serious. "They are moving again," she said, placing a file on my desk. "Valence RX. They are preparing an ambush bid for the Southwest Texas Hospital Network." This was a massive, new contract. "They cannot beat our metrics," I said. "They cannot match our 0.3% guarantee." "They are not trying to," Tilda said. "They are trying to undercut our price. They are bidding with our exact internal cost per unit numbers. We have another leak." This was not a mid-level fool like David Chen. This was a professional breach. "Which watermark?" I asked. "It is not one of our internal document seeds," she said. "The leak is coming from a high-level data broker in Houston. He is selling corporate intelligence." She pointed to a line item on her report. "And I traced the shell company that hired him. It leads back to a private account held by Trent Wallace." So, my previous analysis had been correct. Trent was demoted, stripped of his team and his power, but he still held his title. He was a ghost in the Valence RX machine. Now he was operating as a rogue agent, using outside brokers, trying to score one last, desperate win to get himself back in the game. He had our real numbers. He was going to present a bid that was $1 cheaper than ours, and in a price-sensitive market like Texas, that might be enough. "He has our price," I said, a cold, clear focus settling over me. "He does not have our value. He is watching our bid. He is not watching our SLA." I looked at the clock. The final bids were due in 24 hours. "He thinks he is holding a winning hand," I said. "We are going to let him play it." I called Priya and Jace. "Pull the bid. We are submitting a last-minute revision." We did not change the price by a single cent. We kept the exact number that Trent had stolen. Instead, we added an addendum, a new 2-page section to the service level agreement. I dictated the terms. We would provide, at no additional cost, a dedicated 24/7 traceability support line, staffed by my own analysts, and we would provide mandatory, on-site cold chain handling training for their entire receiving dock staff in Texas, to be run personally by Tilda Raines. We were not just selling them pharmaceuticals. We were selling them our expertise. We were selling them my team. The bid was submitted. The Texas board met. As predicted, Valence RX submitted their bid, precisely $1 cheaper. The board looked at the two proposals. One was a simple commodity transaction. The other was a partnership. Valence RX, with its skeletal, demoted strategy department and its reliance on stolen data, had no capability to match our service addendum. They could not offer Tilda Raines. They could not offer my support desk. They had no execution. The Texas board signed with Crestline. Trent's stolen data was worthless. I was reviewing the final contract when Evelyn March walked into my office. She did not knock. She was holding a glossy travel brochure. "Napa Valley," she said, placing it on my desk. "There is a regional pharmaceutical summit. All the big West Coast Hospital Alliance members will be there. A keynote, a lot of informal meetings." She smiled, a rare, purely strategic expression. It would be an excellent time for our new vice president to show the flag, solidify our new partnership. I looked at the brochure. Then I looked at my personal calendar, at the event I had saved months ago. Napa, vow renewal of Harper. The dates were identical. Of course they were. Evelyn knew. She had done her homework on me, just as she had a year ago. This was not a coincidence. This was a test. It was an invitation to merge my two worlds. "I agree, Evelyn," I said. It is the perfect time. I made the calls. First, to the resort in Napa. I booked an executive suite for 3 nights. Second, I booked a private, executive meeting room at the same resort for the first morning of the summit. I was not just going to show the flag. I was going to use that meeting to sign the full binding, multi-year contract with the West Coast Alliance, turning my memorandum of understanding into an ironclad reality. I would do it right in the middle of the chaos. The news that I was attending traveled fast. My mother, who was now in regular, if sterile, contact, sent a text. "Harper is so thrilled you are coming. I have been looking at the resort map. It is a big place. Let me meet you at the lobby, and I can walk you into the event hall with the family." She was trying to manage my entrance. She was trying to reabsorb me into the Ellery unit, to present me as the daughter she had successfully retrieved. The prodigal daughter, returned to the fold. I texted back, "That will not be necessary. Mom, I have my own schedule. I will walk in myself." The next text was from Harper. As expected, she was panicking. "Rowan, are you sure about this? I mean, it is great you are coming, but is this not going to be, awkward with everyone? After everything?" She was worried about her party, her performance. My presence was an uncontrolled variable, and it was stressing her out. The old dynamic, all over again. My reply was cold, clean, and final. I was done managing her feelings. "Harper, it will only be awkward if you are pretending, if you are living honestly. There is nothing to fear." I put the phone down. I had just handed the entire burden of truth back to her. My phone buzzed one last time that day. A text from an unknown number. "Rowan, I hear you are going to be in Napa. I think you and I should talk. For real this time. Let us make peace." Trent. He had lost Texas. He knew I was meeting with the West Coast Alliance. He was finished. He was a cornered animal. He was begging for a scrap. I stared at the message. I saw the panic. I saw the final, pathetic attempt of a man who had only ever known how to take. I did not reply. I did not block him. I just left the message on read. I archived the conversation. He was not on my map. He was not even a variable. That night, in my Chicago apartment, I was packing my suitcase. I opened my laptop one last time. I found the old, saved email from my great-grandmother, Margaret Ellery, the one from the safe deposit box. I read the whole thing again, the sharp, intelligent script, and I saw the final line, the one I had glanced at but never truly understood until this moment. "They will not forgive you for building your own house, Rowan, so build it higher, and never, ever wait for someone to invite you onto the stage. You own the stage." I closed the laptop. I felt a profound, absolute calm. The pieces were all in place, the professional and the personal. The battle plan was complete. I turned off the lights. Tomorrow was the boundary line. I fell asleep instantly. The morning light in Napa was clear and golden, the kind of light designed for postcards and expensive fantasies. But I was not there for the fantasy. I was there for the work. My resort was a sprawling campus of luxurious mission-style buildings. In the main ballroom, decorated with an absurd amount of white roses. Harper's one-year anniversary celebration was being set up. The sound of a string quartet tuning up drifted across the lawn. Just one hallway over, in the Sonoma executive boardroom I had reserved, my own event was underway. I was at the head of a polished mahogany table, flanked by Tilda and Priya. Across from me sat the 4 heads of the West Coast Hospital Alliance. My team and I had just walked them through the final implementation plan. "So, to be clear," Rowan, the lead negotiator, said, "your team will be on site at all 12 of our primary receiving hospitals before the first shipment ever arrives?" "Tilda Raines will be," I corrected gently. "She will personally train and certify every member of your receiving staff. We are not just delivering a product. Gentlemen, we are delivering a zero-failure system. Our guarantee starts before the truck ever leaves our hub." The man looked at his colleagues. He nodded. "This is a new chapter, Ms. Ellery. It's a new standard. Mr. Hesh, I replied. He slid the signed memorandum of understanding across the table. It was binding. It was done. Jace's projections were conservative. This contract would likely add 6, maybe 7% to our total market share in the next 3 quarters. My team was packing their briefcases when the door to the boardroom opened without a knock. I looked up. It was Trent Wallace. He looked terrible. The polished, predatory charm was gone, replaced by a desperate, haunted look. His suit was expensive, but it hung on him. He was a ghost. "Rowan," he said, his voice a low rasp. "I need to talk to you. Alone." Tilda and Priya paused, looking at me. I gave them a slight nod. They filed out of the room, closing the heavy doors behind them, leaving us alone in the massive, silent boardroom. "You're not on the attendee list for this summit, Trent," I said. It was not a question. I'm not here for the summit," he stammered, walking forward. "I'm here to talk to you. This has to stop. Rowan, this war. Look, you won, okay? You win. The Texas contract, this West Coast thing, you won." He was pleading. "I'm just asking for a ceasefire, a truce. You don't have to destroy me. Just call it off." I looked at him, at this man who had built his career on theft, this parasite who was now begging his host for mercy. I felt nothing, no pity, no anger, just the cold, final click of a lock falling into place. I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a single, laminated sheet of paper. I slid it across the mahogany table, just as the hospital executive had slid the contract. It was the digitally magnified comparison of my watermarked cost analysis from the Texas bid and the one he had used to hire the data broker. His digital fingerprint, the unassailable proof of his crime. He looked at it, the last bit of color drained from his face. He knew what it was. "You are used to taking shortcuts, Trent," I said, my voice quiet, but it filled the cavernous room. "I am used to building the right road. Those two habits do not share a path." I stood up, picking up my briefcase. "You were never my competition. You were just a bad piece of data, and I've just archived you." I started to walk to the door. "Please," he whispered. "Rowan, don't." "You are not on my map, Trent," I said, without looking back. "You do not exist." I opened the door and walked out into the bright, sunlit hallway. Harper was standing right there. She was in a simple, elegant dress, her hair down. She had clearly just come from the ballroom. She was staring, not at me, but at the man I had left broken in the boardroom. She had seen him. She had seen the entire, cold, final execution. She looked back at me. Her eyes were wide. She was not seeing the sister she had forgotten. She was seeing the vice president who had just finished a kill. "Rowan?" she said, her voice small. "Harper," I said, my professional calm fully in place. We're starting," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the music. "Everyone is here, Mom and Dad." "I'll be there in a moment," I said. I had to get this contract to my team. "No," she said. It was the firmest I had ever heard her be. "Rowan, please, come with me, now." She was not asking me to be a prop. She was asking me to be there. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her fear was gone, replaced by a new, strange resolve. I nodded. "Okay, Harper." She led the way. We walked down the terracotta-tiled hallway, away from the corporate wing, toward the celebration. The sound of the string quartet grew louder. We entered the ballroom. It was full, my entire extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins from Boise, was there. They were all holding glasses of champagne. When they saw me, a ripple of silence fell over the room. They stared. The whispers were immediate, audible. "That's her. Is that Rowan?" I didn't know she was. My mother and father stood at the front. My mother looked like she was going to faint. My father just looked at me, his eyes full of a complex, profound sadness. Harper walked me to the front row and sat me down. She squeezed my hand, once, then went to join Colin. My father stepped up to the small microphone. He cleared his throat. "Welcome, everyone," he said, his voice shaking. "We're so glad you could be here. This last year, it's been a year of learning, for all of us. You think you know your family. You think you know what it's made of." He looked directly at me. "This last year," he said, we've had to learn how to name everyone in our family all over again, to see them for who they are, not just who we assumed they were." He raised his glass. "So this is to Harper and Colin, and this is to all of us, to seeing each other clearly." He paused. "Rowan, our daughter, Rowan, is here, and I'd like to invite her up to say a word, if she wants to." The room was absolutely silent. Every eye was on me. My mother was holding her breath. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. The return of the prodigal daughter. The moment for tears, for recriminations, or for a grand, sweeping speech of forgiveness. I stood up. I walked to the microphone. I looked out at all of them. My family, the jury. I did not tell them my story. I did not talk about Oaxaca, or Porto, or the 50th floor. I did not talk about their failure. I just said one sentence. "Thank you for not booking that ticket," I said, my voice clear and steady, amplified in the quiet room. It forced me to learn how to fly the plane myself. I set the microphone down. I walked back to my seat. The stunned silence was broken by the sound of music as the quartet, confused, struck up a cheerful tune. Waiters began to circulate with more champagne. The party, awkwardly, began. As the music swelled, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was an alert from the secure messaging app I used with my team. It was from Priya. "Contract signing with the Hospital Alliance just hit the internal wire. It's public. Our stock just jumped 2 points." At that exact moment, across the room, I saw several other guests, men in suits I recognized from the pharmaceutical summit. All looked down at their own phones. The buzz had started. The news was out. The real event in Napa that day was not Harper's party. It was my contract. I looked across the hallway, out the ballroom doors. I could just see the entrance to the corporate wing. Trent Wallace was standing there, frozen, his back to me. He was staring at his phone. Even from this distance, I could see the final, total collapse of his posture. He had just received the news, the text that told him he was finished, that Valence RX was cutting him loose for good. He looked up, and his eyes met mine from across the hallway. The performance smile was gone. There was nothing left. He was empty. He turned, and he walked away, not toward the party, but toward the exit, a ghost, evaporating in the Napa sunlight. A hand touched my arm. It was Harper. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She just looked at me, her eyes clear for the first time. "I see you," she said. I nodded. Seeing each other is enough. Then, my mother was there. Her hands were trembling. She was not offering a hug. She was holding something. It was a single, paper plane ticket, enclosed in a paper sleeve. I bought this months ago," she stammered. "I kept it in my wallet. I didn't know where you were. I didn't know what to do. I took it. It was not a ticket to Hawaii. It was not a ticket to Boise. It was an open, first-class, fully refundable ticket. The destination was blank. "It's for anywhere," my mother said, tears welling in her eyes. "Anywhere you choose to let me come and visit my daughter." I looked at the ticket, the symbol of my prison, now offered to me as a symbol of my freedom, my autonomy. I nodded. I slipped the ticket into my suit jacket pocket. I turned away from my family, away from the party. I walked back into the hallway, toward the executive boardroom. My team was waiting. The Hospital Alliance was waiting. I sat down at the head of the mahogany table. Priya slid the final, binding contract addendums in front of me. The sound of Harper's party, the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, was a dull, distant roar. In here, the only sound was the quiet, satisfying scratch of my pen on the paper. My map was complete. The family, the industry, they no longer defined me. I had drawn my own lines. I had built my own world, on my own terms. I had called my own stage, and I did not need a sequel. I signed my name, and the deal was closed. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I would love to connect with you and hear your thoughts. Remember to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.